And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, this is talking about Zedekiah, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host against Jerusalem, and pitched against it. And they built forts against it round about, and the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah. And on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine prevailed in the city, and there was no bread for the people of the land. So these Babylonians, the army, they had fortified camps, and they built watchtowers, and they surrounded the city of Jerusalem and laid siege to it. It says for 18 months. That's a remarkable amount of time to lay a siege to a city. I mean, these people were determined to either starve them to death or make them surrender, one or the other. Now, during this siege, there was a certain prophet named Jeremiah. He was watching all this go down. He was weeping and mourning, lamenting for God's people to turn to Him, and they refused. Jeremiah told them to surrender to Babylon, and that God would spare their lives. They might go into captivity, but they would still live a decent life, and God would not destroy the city of Jerusalem. So, you think they listened to Jeremiah?
No.
Good answer. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, 12 through 16, it reads like this. It says, And Zedekiah did that which was evil inside the Lord his God, and humbled not himself before Jeremiah the prophet, speaking from the mouth of the Lord. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who has made him swear by God, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart from turning unto the Lord God of Israel. Moreover, all the chief of the priests and the people transgressed very much against all the abominations of the heathen, and polluted the house of the Lord, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And the Lord God of their fathers sent to them by his messengers, rising up betimes and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God. They despised his words and misused his prophets, until the wrath of the Lord arose against his people, till there was no remedy. So God was very long-suffering with his people, but they refused to turn to him. And it says, till there was no remedy. And in Jeremiah chapter 38, it records how God told Jeremiah to tell his people that the city was going to be captured for sure. And whoever stays in the city was going to die by the sword, by famine, by plague. But whoever surrenders to the Babylonians will live. Now this word got to Zedekiah, and he demanded that Jeremiah be put to death because he was discouraging Judah's soldiers to fight. He was saying, give up, surrender. So they threw Jeremiah in this dried up cistern and left him for dead, really. And this one guy talked Zedekiah into rescuing him. So Zedekiah then had Jeremiah come to the temple and tell him what his destiny was. And Jeremiah pretty much said, if you'll surrender, God will save you and your family from death. And he will also save the city from being destroyed, being burnt. And Zedekiah, he proceeds to tell Jeremiah that he's afraid that if he surrenders to Babylon, that Babylon will hand him over to the Jews and they'll kill him. So he's kind of in between a rock and a hard spot there. But Jeremiah, he begs Zedekiah to just surrender. And what does he do? Well, we're going to see here in the next section, verse 4. Says, and the city was broken up, and all the men of war fled by night, by the way of the gate between two walls, which is by the king's garden. Now the Chaldees were against the city round about, and the king went the way towards the plain. And the army of the Chaldees pursued after the king and overtook him in the plains of Jericho. This is roughly 15 miles northeast of Jerusalem. And all his army were scattered from him. So Nebuchadnezzar's army, these Chaldeans, they finally break through the city walls. And what happens? Zedekiah and his army, they flee through the gate towards the north. So picture it this way. Zedekiah and his family and his army, they leave Russell Springs and they head towards Columbia about 15 miles away. That's where the Babylonians catch up to them. Zedekiah's army scatters and leaves Zedekiah and his family to get captured. So it's ironic that Jericho, the very spot where Israel first came into the Promised Land, is now captured because of their sin, their unrepentance. And this is the very last Davidic king, and his monarchy is going to be shattered. So verse 6 says, So they took the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon to Riblah, that's up north in Syria. And they gave judgment upon him, and they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. So the Babylonians made sure that the last thing Zedekiah seen was his kids getting killed. And then it says they blinded his eyes, put him in handcuffs, and marched him towards Babylon to live the remainder of his life in literal darkness. Now the city of Babylon was about 600 miles away from here. So if they walked, you can figure it up. That's roughly 200, 300 hours worth of walking. So it's going to take them a while to get there. A few months, I'd say. The prophet Ezekiel gave this prophecy about Zedekiah just before the fall of Babylon occurred. He says, or this is God speaking, he says, My net also will I spread upon Zedekiah, and he shall be taken in my snare. And I will bring him to Babylon, to the land of the Chaldeans, yet he shall not see it, though he shall die there. That was a prophecy that was 100% accurate, wasn't it? And verse 8 says, And in the 5th month of the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem. And he burnt the house of the Lord, that's the temple, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. And all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard brake down the walls of Jerusalem round about. So this Nebuzaradan guy, he's a ruthless instrument of God's judgment on Jerusalem. Now the Hebrew meaning for this name, Nebuzaradan, I looked it up, it means chief executioner or the slaughterer. And that's a very fitting name for what he did. He not only burned down the temple, he broke down the city walls, it says. He burnt the king's palace, burnt the houses in Jerusalem. So Jerusalem's no longer a place of safety for God's people. It's an absolute desolation, and it's going to remain a desolation for the next 70 years according to Jeremiah's prophecy. Anybody got any comments or questions so far? All right, we'll keep going. Verse 11 says, Now the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away. But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So just as Jeremiah said, the rest of the people left in the city, they were taken in captivity to Babylon. But it says the poorest of the land of Judah were left to be vine dressers and husbandmen. Now, why do you think the poorest of the land was left? Why didn't they take everybody?
I'd have figured they couldn't make that trip.
Possibly. Also because they probably weren't fit for war. Babylon wanted men for war, for their army, strong men.
Couldn't cause no trouble. They didn't have nothing to do with.
Right.
That's the war.
I mean, if we're going to go around and kidnap a bunch of people and we want them to fight for us, are we going to get these bums that's just laying out on the street, or are we going to get people like Jake and Miles and myself to, those are the people they were mostly interested in. And then, so it says they were left to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So they, basically, the way I understand that, they were left to tend to the land, to be farmers, and to intermarry with the pagans that were left in the land, I guess.
Could that already been most of their jobs?
Could have been, I don't know. And verse 13, this is going to give kind of a little description of what all is taken to Babylon. It says, and the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases, and the brazen sea that was in the house of the Lord, did the Chaldeans break into pieces, and carried the brass of them to Babylon, and the pots, and the shovels, and the snuffers, and the spoons, and all the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took they away, and the fire pans, and the bowls, and such things as were of gold, in gold, and of silver, in silver, the captain of the guard took away. The two pillars, so if you remember, there was two pillars at the front of the temple standing there. One was called Jachin, which meant God establishes, and the other one was named, does anybody remember? Boaz. What does that mean? Anybody remember that? It means in God, in Him is strength. So that's these two pillars, one sea, and the bases which Solomon had made for the house of the Lord. The brass and all these vessels was without weight, so they captured more than they could weigh. And verse 17 says, the height of the one pillar was 18 cubits, and the chapter upon it was brass, and the height of the chapter 3 cubits, and the wreathen work and pomegranates upon the chapter round about, all the brass, and like unto these had the second pillar with wreathen work. A more detailed inventory that Babylon took of the temples given in the book of Jeremiah. And ironically, you don't see here or in Jeremiah or even in, I think it's Nehemiah gives a list of things that were brought back after the 70 years. But ironically, Ark of the Covenant is not mentioned in any of these accounts. And the Ark of the Covenant was their most prized possession. So why is it not listed here? Why what happened to it?
It's probably gone.
It either got burnt in the temple, or somebody carried it out and hid it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been people throughout the centuries been looking for that. Now I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole where it might be, but. Anyway, I thought that was interesting that it's not listed. It lists spoons and all these little bitty.
It was the Masons. We did it. We come and got it.
All right, verse 18 says, and the captain of the guard took Seraiah the chief priest and Zephaniah the second priest and the 3 keepers of the door. And out of the city he took an officer that was set over the men of war, and 5 men of them that were in the king's presence, which were found in the city, and the principal scribe of the host, which mustered the people of the land, and 60 men, that's 60, of the people of the land that were found in the city. And Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took these and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah. And the king of Babylon smote them and slew them at Riblah in the land of Hamath. So Judah was carried away out of their land. Now that little section there, those 4 verses, that sounds to me very eerily similar to the way the Islamic group ISIS took Christians back in 2015. They led them up the beach and beheaded them on camera for the world to see. That sounds very eerily similar to that. So now
Well, they're the same genealogy, too.
they are. They sure are.
It's the same folk.
Syrians.
What do they say? The apple don't fall far from the tree.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of, I think, could be a shadow of the future.
Sure.
A lot of people think the son of tradition will come out of Catholicism. I don't think that at all. I think it'll come out of that nation.
Yeah, I do too.
I think at one point that made sense because of the Dark Ages, but we don't longer live in the Dark Ages, and there's really no power within Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
But there is great power in the fastest growing religion per capita today, which is Islam.
Yeah. Greatest false religion man's ever created. All right, at the end of verse 21 there says, so Judah was carried away out of their land. Now, I want us to understand that the acts of ancient Israel and Judah and their judgment that they received are examples of what can happen to us as Christians if we disobey God. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, and we'll get it more into this as we get to Corinthians, but it says in chapter 10, now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things, as Israel also lusted. Now all these things happened unto them for examples, and they are written for our admonition. That means our warning, upon whom the ends of the world are come. So everything we've read thus far in the Kings is a blueprint for us to read and to look at and to learn by. Verse 22 says, and as for the people that remained in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had left, now these are the poorest of the land it's talking about, even over them he made Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan, ruler. So Nebuchadnezzar appoints this ruler or governor, whatever you want to call him, over the poorest of the land that's left in Judah. And when all the captains of the armies, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah governor, they came to Gedaliah to Mizpah, even Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, and Johanan the son of Kareah, and Sariah the son of Tanhumeth the Netophathite, and Jasoniah the son of Maacathite, they and their men. And Gedaliah sware to them and to their men, and said unto them, fear not to be the servants of the Chaldees. Dwell in the land and serve the king of Babylon, and it shall be well with you. So it seems like this Gedaliah is a pretty good feller. And he's actually a friend of the prophet Jeremiah. You can see that in a couple different places in Jeremiah. But Gedaliah, he attests to the words of Jeremiah to the poor of Judah not to fear these servants of Babylon, but just dwell in the land and serve Nebuchadnezzar, and everything will be fine. Now the Babylonians were doing the work of God in bringing this judgment upon Judah. So in this situation, to resist Babylon, or to resist Babylon's servants, was to resist God. Verse 25 says, "But it came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael the son of Nethaniah the son of Elishama and the seed royal came, and 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah that he died, and the Jews and the Chaldees that were with him at Mizpah. And all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the armies arose and came to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldees." So since Gedaliah, he led the remainder of the people to submit to these Babylonians, he was assassinated because he was a traitor to them to resist the movements of the Babylonians. It says the rest fled to Egypt, I think because they were probably afraid of what the Babylonians would do to them in light of the assassination of Gedaliah. All right, we'll finish up here. The last few verses kind of gives a little glimmer of hope for the Jews. Verse 27, it says, "And it came to pass in the 37th year of the captivity of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, that evil Merodach, king of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, did lift up his head, up the head of Jehoiachin, king of Judah, out of prison. And he spake kindly to him, and set his throne above the throne of the kings that were with him in Babylon, and changed his prison garments, and he did eat bread continually before him all the days of his life, and his allowance was continual allowance, given him of the king a daily rate for every day all the days of his life." Now, why would you think the king of Babylon, especially with a name like evil Merodach, why would he suddenly show grace to this former king of Judah that was in prison? I think maybe it was evidence of the promise of God that he would eventually bless and restore a remnant of his people, possibly. I really don't know. That's just the only thing I could think of. Now, what other Hebrew man was in the courts of Babylon during this time that might have persuaded this king to do that? Can you remember? Daniel. I have to wonder if Daniel might have been thinking about God's promise that he made back there to David years and years ago, that he would have a king who'd sit on the throne of David forever. And this Jehoiachin, this is the only king from the lineage of David that's left. Zedekiah, he might still be alive, but he's blind, and his family's dead, so I don't know.
So now, did they get mixed up at some point? So Babylon did Babylon take over Assyria at some point?
Yeah.
Okay. I missed that.
Yeah, Babylon is the world power at this time.
At this time, yeah. So basically, the nation of Israel and Judah are back together, but in captivity. But they're
Possibly.
in captivity together, I guess. Maybe separate lands, but under the same ruler.
Assyria conquered Israel,
Yeah.
took them to Assyria, which was Iraq and up in that area. Babylon is southern Iraq,
Yeah.
close to Iran, Persia, in that area. So it's possible they could have currently got back together throughout this, however many years has passed, more than 70, obviously, but I don't know.
And then
it's
at this
hard to
time,
say.
Daniel's an old man, right?
Do what now?
You said you were talking about Daniel maybe being persuading them, but Daniel would be a pretty old man at this point, right?
Not necessarily.
No, not really.
Daniel lived out his captivity, but he was taken as a young lad.
Yeah, you got to think Daniel was taken in the first captivity of Jerusalem, which was in 605. He was just a young guy at that time,
Okay.
maybe 15.
Okay.
And this is happening roughly 20 years in the future. So he'd probably been in his 30s
Yeah.
at this time. And he lived 70 years
Yeah.
That's, in captivity.
in captivity.
Yeah.
So he was a very old man, by the time Judah was allowed to come back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, these are all great stories and great lessons that we've learned from these two books here. The people of Israel and Judah, they love to flirt with idolatry. So God says, I'm going to take you to idolatry city, baby.
You know what's interesting about this, though, Brother Kyle, is if you go into Hollywood and the entrances to the Oscars is all Babylonian symbols. So there's some wild stuff even infiltrated into America. That's all this stuff, and all of it roots from the devil.
Yeah.
And I try not to give him too much credit, but I mean, you can go back and kind of like ancient Egypt, all that stuff. It all stems out of Satan and his lineage. But I thought it was interesting. You was talking about the ark. Did they hide it? Did they get took, or did God remove it?
It's on Oklahoma.
Because is that something that I mean, we all know that the ark and the mercy seat represents Christ, and Christ became our ark of the covenant.
Right.
So God removing the old ark, the old testator, to establish the new. I don't think they'll ever find it personally. I think it's gone. I think God's removed it from this planet because He has given us His only begotten Son. And I thought about that, because the ark wasn't there mentioned in the Scriptures. And then we see in the book of Ezekiel and the book of Daniel, God being present in Babylon. And we see, especially in the book of Ezekiel, God's spiritual throne coming before Ezekiel at the river. And that just, to me, is awesome that God promises is still going with His people. They went in captivity, and He just exactly what He told Jeremiah, and He was with them all the way through that captivity. And we see Him physically in the fire, in Daniel's time. So.
Right. What's some takeaways that you all have gotten from these two books?
A little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. Starts small,
Right.
ends big.
I'll go a little broader. There's a lot of good teachings in the historical text.
Sure.
That is not, you go to most churches and this ain't taught in Sunday school. Because it's not as exciting as some of the other accounts in the Bible.
Right.
But it's 100% necessary to know the history of Judah and Israel, to see these things played out, especially when we know the end in time. Like, we know that Christ comes, fulfills a lot of these covenants, and we can see Christ. All these roads are pointing straight to it and what's to come. So that's what I took away from it, is it's very, it is a necessary text, is the reason why God left it in the Bible the way we got it.
Right, yeah. Paul said it's for our admonition.
Yes.
So, somebody else got anything?
Provoke the Lord to anger, and there's going to be consequences. Because all these kings through all these years kept going back to idolatry.
Yep.
He told them this in His word that He's going to destroy them. They're going to be taken captive. And He gave it.
Yeah.
He postponed it a time or two, that give them extra time, and they still didn't work.
Sure.
To me, I think going all the way back to the beginning with Saul, he told them they didn't need a king.
Yeah.
Right.
And we got to be like other people. And they did it. And it just ate at them like a canker
So
eventually.
I saw something real neat about that. Saul is a Benjamite. If you look back, Saul's a Benjamite. And Jacob tells Benjamin that he's going to be a ravenous wolf back in Genesis. And then you look at King David is from the line of Judah, right? So you look at, then you fast forward to Christ. Christ is from the line of Judah, from King David. And then you look at Paul. Paul is a Benjamite, a ravenous wolf. And it shows you think about it like this, shows you what, you let Christ in, what a ravenous wolf can do for Christ. If Saul had a little bit of God in him, he'd have done the right things. But he let pride in his way. I thought, buddy, that's pretty good.
That's interesting.
A little deep in the Bible.
Yeah.
You got to look at some different pages and stuff where, because I didn't realize that Saul was a Benjamite until I started reading. I was like, oh yeah, he says he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't read about Paul being pretty neat.
I knew Paul was.
Well,
but
and
I
then you
didn't
look
know-
at Saul of Tarsus, ends up being Paul. You look at Saul, the first king was, it's just like, there's no coincidences. It's just cool how
He
that
could have
stuff
had
works.
his name changed to Paul, couldn't he?
He could, yeah, there you go. I just think that's neat. I thought that's pretty neat.
I think a question that we can all ask ourselves from these books here that we've read is, who is the king or who rules over my life? Are you the king of your own life? Is Donald Trump your king, or is the King of Kings your king?
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best question we can ask ourselves from this whole study. Let not your will be done, but let the Father's will be done.
Yes.
All right, I'm very excited to start 1 Corinthians next week, so be studying on that book, start reading ahead on it, and pray for my understanding so that I can teach it in a way that it provokes us to think and to react. Because there's some difficult things in that letter.
Yes.
And it applies to us too, not just the Corinthians. All right, anybody else got anything before we take a break? All right. Thank you, brother.
Friday the 13th.